Good morning. Good to see you. This December, my firstborn, Pax, will turn 4 years old. And when he was born, it is no exaggeration to say he changed our lives. A story my wife won't let me forget is that Pax was born at UCLA because of a number of medical concerns, and we were there for about a week, and you have to valet park your car when you go to Ronald Reagan. And we came down, and I gave the valet my ticket, and he went and got my car and came back. And I'm just so overcome with emotion, and I'm just so fragile. And he goes to hand me my keys, and I just wrap him up in some big bear hug and hold him. He hugged back. I understand, #MeToo. And he hugged back, and I just held on to him for an awkwardly long time until Megan taps me on the shoulder and says, "Honey, he was just giving you the keys back." So now I have a really good friend that's a valet at UCLA. I was super scared, and to be a father, I'd wanted it for a long time, but didn't know what being a father meant. And so one of the categories that initially scared me, still does, now that I have two, was how we were going to help Pax were he to want to go to college. One of the greatest gifts my parents were able to give me was a bachelor's degree without student loans. It wasn't that my family was well off, it was that my father took out the student loans and spent the next decade after I left paying off the student loans. That sacrifice set my life on a certain trajectory that I'm incredibly grateful for, and Megan would say the same. And I realized college is not for everybody, and paying for college is incredibly difficult, especially on a pastor's salary. And so I had a friend at our old church that was a financial advisor, and I'd never seen one before, so I went to him and I was like, "Hey man, I've got a kid now, and I want to at least try to be able to help were he to want to go to college. What should I do with pantheon of 529 plans and promise plans and all that?" I didn't know a lot about it. And after talking to him for an hour or so, it turns out that a number of my early thoughts were ill-conceived. And so he set me kind of on a right path, and so we're saving slowly. And what I discovered after meeting with him was, I just really hope Pax is good with a soccer ball. We're not going to be able to help much. I mean, even starting 18 years out, man. You know who I didn't ask for financial advice? My barber. I didn't ask my barber. David gives me a sick fade, but I don't think he should be the financial authority in my life. I didn't ask Bernie Madoff, somebody who's a knowledgeable financier but has proven to be untrustworthy. I didn't ask a pastor because it's not my prayer life. It's my financial life and my financial future. And so I'm sure Scott and Doug and Marcy would have excellent advice, but at the end of the day, I wanted somebody who was an expert in this area. This seems like an appropriate time to distinguish between expert or expertise and a wise advisor. Expertise looks like skill or knowledge and experience in a very specific field of study. If my toilet's backing up, I don't necessarily need to find a Christian to fix my toilet. I just want a great experienced plumber, right? If he's a Christian, wonderful, but he's agnostic. As long as you clear the block, man, I'm pretty good with it. But a wise advisor traffics in frameworks and processes, and most importantly, values. They traffic in questions and getting at what God's doing in our heart and in our life. I certainly hope that you give my voice and my opinion, Doug, Scott's, and our staff, more weight than you do your barista when it comes to marriage and child rearing and all those different things. But when it comes to something like brake pads, don't listen to a word I have to say. Go to my friend Bill. He knows what he's talking about. So no, there's a difference between expertise and wisdom. But wisdom, those of us who've been walking with the Lord for a while, understand that wisdom helps us build the life we'll love. Neglect will build the life we'll want to escape. Wisdom is not just about what we should do. Wisdom is about who we want to become. This week, we finish our series, The Best Yes. We've been talking for 4 weeks about how to make decisions, how to discern God's will. Again and again and again in life, we come to a fork in the road where we've got to decide this way or that, yes or no. Should I take the job? Should I not? Should I marry her? Should I not? Should I take the promotion? Should we move from California? That one's becoming increasingly hot topic, right? All these different things like, God, what is your will? God, what are you saying? God, where are you leading? And how to get at that. And so this morning, if you have your Bibles, we're going to be in Psalm chapter 1, where we're going to look at where wisdom can be found, where wisdom seems to hang out. But when I talk about wisdom, I'm talking about the very thing we've been trying to get at. What is our best yes? How is God directing? How is God leading? Psalm chapter 1, you would think we're talking about wisdom. We'd go to Proverbs. Proverbs is a collection of wisdom sayings. Maybe we'd go to Ecclesiastes. Well, Ecclesiastes is a guide for when you followed the best wisdom you knew and things still didn't turn out the way you wanted. Psalm 1 specifically, a psalm of wisdom to begin the Psalter, is about where the wise hang out, where wisdom can be found. Psalm chapter 1. Psalms, specifically chapter 1, begins with two presuppositions. One, that everyone is on a path in life, so it invokes the question, what path are you on? And two, that the righteous path leads to abundant life and the wicked path leads to destruction. Beware. Beware. Psalm 1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers. It begins with the idea that you're looking to blessing, or for blessing. You're coming to the text wanting to be obedient. You're coming to the Word of God looking for direction, looking for insight. Go to the first word, blessed. The first two Hebrew words right there that comprise blessed are, happy are the steps. Happy steps. Now, before we get too theologically dense, who doesn't want happy steps? Who in here would be like, nah, man, want difficult steps? The Proverbs say that wisdom brings a meaningful relationship. Wisdom brings good sleep. Wisdom brings health to the bones. Wisdom brings financial security. Wisdom brings a clear conscience, and wisdom sleeps well at night. Was there anything there that you would say you don't want? No, of course I want all that. Everybody wants wisdom. And so the text assumes the reader's coming and saying, yes, please give me more wisdom. Blessed is the one, blessed is the person, blessed is the individual who does not, stop there. Notice that the wise begin with boundaries. Wisdom begins with boundaries. Wise is the one who does not blank. You know, we don't talk a lot about boundaries and prudence. Those aren't necessarily terms, discipline that are just real popular. No one pops up in the club and they're like, man, let's be more prudent, dude. Like it's not a topic of interest, but wisdom suggests boundaries, discipline, and prudence are the only way we get there. Think about the creation story that God had darkness and created light. He did not dispel the darkness, but gave the darkness boundaries. It's impossible to make anything beautiful, including a beautiful life, apart from boundaries. No. Wisdom wouldn't go there. No, wise people wouldn't go there. Talk to them. Do that. Because they're wise, so they understand the necessity of boundaries. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, stand in the way of sinners, take or sit in the company of mockers. I want to break verse 1 up into verbs and nouns. That's important, verbs and nouns. So let's look at this. Blessed is the one who does not walk. Who does not walk. This is going to reveal between all three of these a deterioration of association. Walk, stand, and sit. The best way to think about it is in the story of Lot. Lot goes to Sodom and he initially lives in a tent outside the city. And then a few verses later, he is found living in the interior of the city. And then a few verses later, he's a magistrate or judge within the city condoning its sin. It's a snuggling up. It's a warming up to wickedness. It's a snuggling up to unrighteousness and injustice. Do not walk. Take advice, literally in the Hebrew. Don't be casual with it. Sophocles said, of all the enemies in the world, none is worse than bad advice because it will cost you the very thing it promises you. It will cost you the very thing it promises you. Be wary of snuggling up to bad advice. Be cautious in who you take advice from. Second, do not stand in the way of sinners. This is halting to consider a lifestyle. Halting to consider their lifestyle. We look at people that are successful in business or in their career, financially well off, and think they must have it all together. They must know the right way. They must know the path if I can just follow them. But the truth is, while jet skis are a lot of fun, they won't make you whole at night. A big, beautiful house with nice furnishings are wonderful, but it means nothing when your marriage is falling apart and your kids don't like you. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing they figured it out because they have all the nice toys. But they don't know. They don't necessarily know. Be wary of taking advice from people who seem to have some success in an area, but you don't really know if they have your values and your moorings in mind. I was reading the other day a rabbi speak on the Midrash and the Ten Commandments. What do you do with your Wednesday nights? And he said that we've always understood, the Jewish people have always understood that the 10th commandment is not a commandment, but a blessing or reward. The 10th commandment being, do not covet. That if you follow the first 9, you won't want anybody else's life. Hi-oh. I just sat on that for a while. That if you follow the first 9, you're not going to covet or envy anybody else's lifestyle. You'll want your own. Do not walk. Do not stand. Do not sit. Hebrew for colluding, doing with evildoers, acting as though they act. Listen, this, to be cautious, they always say, when you're swinging on a pendulum, you run through moderation to the other extreme. We got to be careful of running to the other extreme. We do the testimony of the church and the testimony of Jesus no good thing when we become the weird family in the neighborhood. Sure, we're not colluding. Our lifestyle should not look like that of a non-believer, but we also don't have to be the people who never cut our hairs and only talk about Kirk Cameron movies. We can be semi-normal people that will look distinguishable when we're generous, when we're kind, when we're hospitable, when we talk about people around other people in kindness and generosity. Do not be the type of people that end up living exactly like the evildoers, but let's also not run to the other extreme. Walk, stand, sit. Let's go with the verbs. Or nouns, rather. Wicked. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked. This is translated ungodly. Those who want nothing to do with God and nothing to do with his covenant. This is why we tell single people it's unwise to marry or date a non-believer. It's not that they're bad people. It's not that they're not kind people. It's simply that marriage is tough, and at the end of the day, you're going to come into conflict when you are called to a standard that they do not recognize. Have nothing to do with the ungodly. Ultimately, it's going to end poorly for you. There are people who want nothing to do with God and his covenant. Second, sinners. These are people who are in active rebellion against God. These are people who not only are disinterested in the covenant of God, disinterested in the salvation, the story of God, but people who would say, I have avarice, I'm antagonistic. Forget God, forget the gospel. Are there people like that you're getting closer to? The wicked, the sinner, and finally, the mocker. This is an arrogant individual who loves conflict. This week in your small group material, and if you don't have that book, pick it up on your way out. You're going to look at a story in 1 Kings where Rehoboam has to make a decision as to what advisors he's going to listen to. And I want you to notice in that study that ultimately it's temperance that makes the difference, not youth, not age. That he listens to a bunch of hotheads. He listens to a bunch of people who love to fight and love to bicker. These are those people. And listen, if you are somebody who can be a hothead, if you're somebody who loves a good fight, someone always ready to throw down and bow up, I want to encourage you to begin praying about that, thinking about that. And maybe at the end of the service today, you come to one of the sides. We'd love to pray for you. Hey, we're all still becoming. We're all still becoming. We're all still trying to figure these things out. But it's not okay for us to simply, I had an Italian friend when I lived in Seattle, and he used to just blow up. And he'd be like, hey, man, FBI, full-blooded Italian. It's what we do. I'm like, no, you should work on that. If that's you, we'd love to pray with you. We got to work on these things, right? The wise understand that advisors, associations, and environment matter. The wise are thinking about where to place themselves. She knows where to go and not to go. Environment, advisors, associations matter because we're all going to be discipled. We get to determine by who. We're all going to be discipled. We get to choose who does the discipling. Verse 2. He's only on verse 2? Yeah, we'll go fast. Verse 2, the wise, their delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. Their delight, their greatest desire is to please and obey God. That as we enter the discernment process, as we're looking for an advisor, we're looking for wisdom, our conclusion's always going to be, God, what would honor you? God, what would please you? God, what is your will for my life? God, it's a yes before I ask the question, where would you have us go? But whose delight, whose passion's pleasing God, and who meditates on his law day and night. That meditate there in the Hebrew is the cooing of a pigeon and the roaring of a lion. That the most natural thing for the Christian, for the believer, is asking, God, where are you? God, where are you? God, where are you? God, what do you want me to do here? God, what do you want me to do here? It's so natural for the believer, so natural for the wise. They're constantly asking, God, where are you in this? God, how would you have me respond? God, how would you have me act? It's as natural and untaught as the cooing of a pigeon, the roaring of a lion. God, where? Where would you have me go with this? What do you want? Yes, before I ask. Verse 3, the person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Notice that the righteous, they're like a strong, mature tree, stable, rooted. It's planted, it bears fruit, and it's near a life-giving source. The wise know where to find themselves. It's one of the reasons we talk all the time about church and being at church. The wise know where life is found. The trees planted near a life-giving source. And that makes the difference between that and the wicked. No, they're blown around. They're like chaff. They have no roots. They have no foundation. They're just taking the temperature of the room. They're blown by the wind. They need validation, and they can only hope to land in a good place. I want you to consider they need validation. Unable to go it alone. Unable to go their own way. Verse 4, not so with the wicked. They're like chaff. The wind blows them away. Verse 5, therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Just one more word there, and then I'll leave you alone. The Lord watches. It's Hebrew for yada, which means an intimate knowing as author. Whoo! An intimate knowing as author. It's contrasted with the way of the wicked that says they are the author of their path. The difference between the righteous and the wicked is the righteous allow God to determine their path. The wicked say, no. I got this. I got this. God, whatever you want, it's a yes. I'm on board. Where are you? Where are you going? How can I hitch my wagon to you? The wicked, God, get out of my way. I got a plan. I know what to do. I know where to go. I don't need anybody else. I will author my own path, and it will lead to destruction. Now, I understand in this room there is both people who need wisdom and people who will offer wisdom. Now, when I say need wisdom, all of us do until the day you die. That's the great thing about wisdom. Wisdom has no ceiling. IQ has a ceiling, education has a ceiling, but wisdom has no ceiling. I sat at breakfast this week with a 50-something-year-old friend, very intelligent man, very mature believer. He said, Brian, we're just trying to figure out how to care for our aging parents. I need wisdom. That is what makes him a wise person. He knows in his 50s, he's still growing in wisdom. He still needs to discover, discern, divine the best yes. And then there are people in here that based upon our age, and I'm much, much younger than all of you, based upon our age, the likelihood is we'll continue to be sought out for advice. So how do we offer good advice? So I've got a couple suggestions or thoughts for both. First, for people seeking advice, for people who are longing for advice, wise people seek out advice and counsel from people unlike themselves. Wise people seek out advice and counsel for people unlike themselves because we're not just looking for validation. We're not just looking for people to say, yeah, and rubber stamp our first thought. We seek out people who are not like us and go, am I off? Is this right? Does God seem to be in this? There was an MBA study recently where they looked at high-performing CEOs of large companies and low-performing CEOs of companies. And significantly more, the low-performing CEOs sought out advisors from people in the same industry with the same performance level, where people in high-performance industry sought out advisors who were in other industries performing better than them. Don't just look for people like you. That's why we tell teenagers all the time, like, your best advisor is not your 15-year-old friend. It's the blind leading the blind there. Like, find your small group leader who's walked some life and lived some life. That goes for those of us in our 40s and 50s and 60s. We're looking for wisdom in places that are not necessarily like us. Candidly, my best advisor for the last 22 years of my life has been a 65-year-old single pastor, a woman in Houston, Texas. It's true that the soul is built in attentiveness, and she's able to ask questions that just get directly to what God is saying and speaking to me. We are nothing alike, and yet God uses her in my life. On these FaceTime calls, she's able to give me framework to interpret, discern, listen, hear, and become more attentive to my soul. Wise people seek out advice and counsel from people unlike themselves. Number 2, just because someone is in your circle does not mean they are in your corner. Yeah, new wingtips coming in hot. Just because someone is in your circle does not mean they are in your corner. When I initially thought about this, I thought about people in the workforce, women and men who are somewhere on an organizational chart, and the person maybe just above you is in your circle. You lunch together, you have coffee together regularly, maybe happy hours, and so they're in your circle. It's someone that you may initially want to emulate, right? Like, they've made it to the next rung. I want to be in their office in 5 years. And it's very difficult to separate that although I admire them, they may not be my best advisor because they certainly don't necessarily have my best interest at heart. Then I thought about the drop-off. The drop-off, sometimes I call it the drop-off runway. Some of y'all moms and dads spend way too much time looking pretty before you drop your kids off, all right? So I am walking up and I just look like I had a night, people. And I do drop off most days with my 4-year-old at the preschool. And I thought, I love that we go to a school where people are rolling in Defenders and my beat up old 25-year-old Lexus. They're in my circle, but I don't know because I admire them, they're in my corner. Meaning, be wary of who you take advice from. Just because they're around doesn't mean they have your best interest. Be wary of immediately concluding they figured it out, theirs is better. They might just be around, but not in your corner. Just because someone is in your circle doesn't mean they're in your corner. Third, wisdom is not based upon consensus or pro-cons list. Wisdom is not based upon consensus or pro-cons list. It is unwise, I will tell you definitively, it is unwise to make all your decisions by gathering all the people in the room and going, and who thinks yay, okay? All right, and all those opposed, same sign. Great. Robert's Rules of Order, done, decision made. That is not the wisest way to make decisions. In fact, again and again, as you look in the Old Testament and the New Testament, it is the minority positions that God seems to be leading his people into. It's the margins, right? That Noah didn't have to battle with a fleet of ships. That Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't have to reserve seats in the fire. And you couldn't fill a Starbucks with the number of people still following Jesus in the end. They're minority positions. So if the greatest tool you have to discern and make life-changing decisions is consensus or a pros-cons list, which ultimately just honestly is most often your predetermined bias. Pros cons list are most often just your predetermined bias. I really want this one to win out. That's not wisdom. That's not wisdom, that's sandbagging. Pros cons list, consensus. It's never the best way to make a decision. Number 4, and finally, always ask a more mature believer and beware of proceeding without confirmation. Always ask a mature believer and beware of proceeding without confirmation. If you are disinterested, unwilling to talk to a more mature believer than you about a decision you have, beware. You're hiding for some reason. And that suggests one of the options is not good. We talk about this with single people all the time in middle school and high school. If you can't talk with your parents about your dating relationship, there's a red flag on the play already. And if there's any decision you're making, I think, I really respect and trust that woman. I really trust and respect that man. And if I tell them about it, they're going to tell me no, so I'm not going to seek them out. You're hiding. Caution, do not proceed. No, it's only after I've talked to a couple of wise advisors that I feel like I'm able to move forward. A couple years ago, we were interviewing for a position. It was like a decade ago for a church. And the elders were in a different place than Megan and I were. And they were asking, well, at the end of the day, if one of you has to make a decision, who gets to make that decision? I said, we don't make it. No, but at the end of the day, the decision's got to be made. And you are not on the same page. Who makes the decision? We don't make it. Because we're partners. And so she being my wisest advisor, if we're not on the same page, there's a reason we're not on the same page. Now, there have been moments in our marriage where the other will come to the partner and say, after a lot of prayer, I still don't know, but I trust you. And I feel like you have more information about this, or you're further along in this than me, so I'm willing to go along. But if we're at odds, and I'm way against it, she's way against it, we don't make a decision. We wait. We talk to our advisors, we talk to our mentors. And if you're unwilling to do that, beware of proceeding. That says something. All right, last category. I feel like it's when a pastor takes off his watch. I'm almost done. For people offering wisdom, wise advisors do not prefer their own opinion. Wise advisors do not prefer their own opinion. No one's situation is exactly like yours. Beware of being defensive or coming to the conversation with a predetermined outcome. I think the best advice always begins with questions. One of the things that I love, and there are many, about our pastor, whenever I invite Doug in on a conversation or I go to Doug for advice or offer an idea, the first thing he says almost every time is, do you want wow or do you want how? Do you want me to be celebratory? This is a great idea. All your ideas are wonderful. Or do you want me to ask, how in the world are we going to pull this off? It's one of the many reasons I think he's an excellent advisor and a wise, wise man, because he knows great advice begins with questions. Wisdom traffics in questions, framework, values. What are you trying to get at here? And it's not offended when the person doesn't take their advice. Maybe we made the wrong call. I'm not a prophet. Y'all, that was too well timed. Why don't we just take this to prayer? Hi-yo. That's just the Lord telling me to land this plane. Last. Wise advisors are sensitive to unsolicited and unhelpful advice. Wise advisors are sensitive to unsolicited, unhelpful advice. This looks like platitudes. If it fits on grandma's pillow on the couch, it's probably not great advice. And also, wisdom understands that suffering needs to be witnessed, not placated. Wisdom understands that suffering, hurt, needs to be witnessed. The wise advisors create space when people are hurting. And they don't need platitudes. They don't need, well, brother, that sounds rough. Just trust God. All right, have a good one. Well, Fully rely on God. Have a good one. That doesn't help. It doesn't mean it's not true, but it doesn't help. No one is more prone to platitudes than couples with young children. I'll give you my favorite two. The first one is we got pregnant with Pax, and they were like, woo, pregnant, congratulations. Get your sleep now. Better bank that sleep. Woo, never going to sleep again. Okay, well, it's not that that's not true. It's not helpful. Like you walk away going, oh, our life's over. The second one that it was really not helpful whatsoever is when you have two young kids, and both of our kids are under 4, and our house looks like a tornado all the time, and there's like crumbs. Like my wife is taken to having to wear house shoes because she can't handle all the crumbs at the bottom of her shoe. And I'm like, we just vacuumed, we just Swiffered. How are there crumbs everywhere? And someone will go, savor these moments. Savor these moments. They will go by too fast. Not fast enough. Y'all, he's not in here, so I can say this. My 4-year-old turned into somebody different in the last couple months. He's a demon. I'm speaking from a pastoral theological position. He's a demon. I don't know what's going on with that kid, man. Savor these moments. No! I'm going to get through these moments. Wise people are sensitive to unsolicited, unhelpful advice. Wise people are often understand that saying things like, man, this stinks, I am so sorry, is sometimes the best advice they can offer. Will you come to me and let me just pray with you? Can I be your backstop when you just want to vent, when you just want to yell at somebody? I want to be that person for you. And I want to tell you that what you're feeling is legitimate. What you're feeling is real, and I understand it, and God gets it. So let's go to God together, and I'm going to walk through this with you. In 1838, Charles Darwin just came back from the Galapagos Islands. Now, we all have an opinion about Charles Darwin, that which we understand and believe and that which we don't. He grew up a Unitarian, but later in life was a professed agnostic. He had a volume of journals when he was in the Galapagos Islands that would eventually become The Origin of Species, his most famous work. But he came back from his travels with a bigger problem in mind. Should he marry Emma Wedgewood? Emma Wedgewood was his infatuation, his first cousin, and he didn't know if now was the time. And so this 2-degree Cambridge-educated, brilliant biologist, his only resort was to make a pros-cons list. So he made a pros-cons list. I just want to read you a couple of things he wrote in his journal. Well, if I marry, cons, loss of time, quarreling, cannot read in the evenings. No one in here was thinking about getting married like, well, I can't read in the evenings now. How the times have changed. Anxiety, financial responsibility. And in the pros column, children, if it please God, a constant companion, and a nice soft wife on the sofa. Do not describe your wife as a nice soft wife. The cons outweighed the pros, and so he decided not to marry Emma. A few weeks later, he records in his diary as he returns to Shrewsbury, England, where he grew up, that a friend of his, one of his best friends, childhood best friends, a guy by the name of Talbot, he was the governor of Shrewsbury, asked him to go for a walk. And he records in the journal the topic, not the content. He says, Talbot would like to speak of marriage. Talbot, a devout Anglican, wanted to talk with Darwin about the value, the benefit of getting married. Darwin comes back to London, and all we know is he ran to Emma's side, asked her to marry him, and they got married. 44 happy years of marriage later, 10 children, 7 survived. On his deathbed, his last words to Emma were, I am not afraid of death. Never forget, you've been a great wife to me. The wise know where to go for advice. The wise know that advisors and associates and environment matter. And no matter your age, wisdom has no ceiling. Seek it out. Let me pray for you. Father, I pray this week, every one of us will be confronted with decisions We just can't live in this world and not have decisions we have to make. Some are not that important. Others have great gravity, life-changing implications. I pray like the cooing of a pigeon, the roaring of a lion, our hearts bent would be to ask God, where are you in this? God, what would you have me do? God, where would you lead me, my partner, our family? How would you lead us to honor you? And we'd begin in prayer, we'd study your word, and then we'd seek out wise advisors who are not just in our circle, but are in our corner. People who will ask us questions that they would make us attentive to what you've put in us, what's going on in our soul. I pray there are people in this room right now who are in the midst of such a decision. They would come down this morning and get prayer at the end of this service. For some, they would get their answer there. For others, they would feel at peace that you will provide that answer soon. I thank you that this is a place of hope where we're reminded you are authoring our journey. And as we seek you, it will land in pleasant, abundant places. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.